These are the books that I really recommend to all of my students. When that big question mark is appearing in the ether above their head, usually the place to get the answer is not in the instruction book or tabbed out solos of Tony Rice solos or something like that. That stuff has its place, but these things go deeper into the mind and, should we say, the psyche of the musician. And they're not necessarily music books. And here's the first one that I recommend to all of my students. And it's a little hard to find, but if you want to play music, you should read this book. It's called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. I bought it at Goodwill. It just looked interesting. I read the book, and I struggled for 5 years or so with a television still in the house. And then my son Jackson was born, and we threw the TV out, and we have not had a television in the house since. Now, I'm not saying this book is the sole reason why I don't own a television. I could go on all day about why a television is not a good thing to have. But read the book, because television interferes with your ability to play music well. That's all I'll say about that right now. Next book, Zen in the Art of Archery. It's a little book. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble or something. You can read it in one night, maybe 2 nights. You should periodically go back and reread it. It's a fascinating book. German guy back in the 1930s who goes to Japan and studies archery with a Zen master. And there are so many parallels between his learning archery, the art of archery, and you and I trying to learn the art of playing music. It's good. You should read it. Here's another oddball I bought. I think I read this as a kid and then lost track of it. Just thought it was a goofy little story, which it is a goofy little story, called Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. It's honestly just a goofy little story, but you should read it. It's pretty deep. This seagull and his efforts to learn to fly better and how that is accomplished is very much like how we are all struggling to play better. Get the book. I'm sure you can buy it for $1 somewhere. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. What works for that seagull will work for you. All right. Next book, I got into this Zen and all this hippy-dippy 60s Jonathan Livingston Seagull stuff. Here's a much more modern take on the whole thing. This is called Zen Guitar. And I don't care what instrument you play, the principles in this book will enlighten you. The principles of the beginner mind are well laid out in here. This guy really hit a home run with this book. Everybody ought to read this. Tune and play. Then, this is my most recent favorite. If you know who Bela Fleck is, you bluegrassers, then I'm sure you know who Victor Wooten is. Victor Wooten is an awesome musician. Look up his YouTube videos, his TED Talk, and that kind of stuff. He's a really cool cat and awesome bass player, and he wrote this book called The Music Lesson. I'm not going to tell you anything about it other than you should read it. If you want to play music, you should read The Music Lesson. And that's it. I think I've covered the 5 biggies. Very little stuff in there. There are no rolls and patterns to learn, no chord progressions, no solos. This stuff is about your mind, and frankly, your mind is where you make music.